Welcome to today's episode of the Resilient CISO. I'm joined by Andy Albrecht, who is the global CISO for Domino's. He has a remarkable career from being a veteran with the US Air Force to the CISO at La Quinta, Michaels, IAA, to name just a few of the highlights. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I've heard him previously talk, and some of his insights are just, buried down in reality. So really looking forward to this conversation. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about Domino's. Your company has managed to do something truly remarkable by putting technology at the heart of the company. You've shown innovation across not only your industry, but through my own personal experience, when I was in financial services, I remember people pointing, CEOs and CTOs and others pointing to Domino's as an example of a capability we want in that industry. Specifically, that was in the mortgage industry, but so many others have had the same exact kind of insight. I'd love to just start the conversation there.
Yeah, no, Harold, thank you as well for having me and love this opportunity to connect with you and just have a fireside chat, if you will. To that point, yeah, absolutely. Technology and innovation is at the heart of everything that we do at Domino's in terms of, and again, I think it was Kramer that I mentioned at one point that we're a technology company that happens to sell pizzas. I'll flip it on its head and say we're here first and foremost for those that are out in the field and our franchisees and our businesses, and it's really them that keep us going, and it's them that give us the inspiration to generate, these technology platforms for them. So, it happens to be an offshoot, but on the other side of it, I mean, if I'm not sure if you can see it through my window here, but we even have a dedicated building that's called the Domino's Innovation Garage that's dedicated to, it has like a mock store in it where we can test our technologies and look for new ways of innovating through technology. So I think it is and will continue to be something that's really important for Domino's, is to lead through in a smart way through technology.
That's absolutely fascinating. And look, I know, I think it's something like 80% of sales for the organization are online.
Yeah, it's closer to
So
85 now is what,
85.
when we just had our earnings call, and that comes out in that quite often. In fact, technology does, to your point, as well as those types of things, but 85 to 85 plus, every year it grows more and more, just in terms of sales that are handled through the digital platform. So
Yeah, it makes me think the balancing act, right? Because between the building right behind you, now 85% of sales are all through your digital online platform. There's a balancing act here, right? Between the delivery side, keeping everything rock solid and being able to innovate quickly. These are very familiar trade-offs in so many organizations. You want to innovate, which of course, requires an accommodation for speed, which doesn't always mean you get to balance every single control, every resilient strategy you want implemented. So there's always that balancing act. I'd love to get your tips, your ideas around how do you
yeah,
make those kinds of tactical decisions?
you know, thank you for bringing that up too. And I think that it's important in one, and we've talked about this before, the two of us, where one of the things that I'm really lucky to have in this organization is a senior leadership team from the top down, from our CEO Russell to my boss Kelly and on down, that embraces cyber and understands it, and isn't something I've never ever felt once where I've been pressured to say, yeah, let's go ahead and put this in, we'll bolt it on later. So there's that, but then it's also incumbent on me and important for me to relay the importance of building in cyber resiliency from the ground up, right? From it's a tale of Bo's time, and it's certainly not my own line. I'm borrowing it from someone else's. Another CISO at some point is that in the CIA triad, availability is the most important. It could be more true in our world because, and I've said this before too, is we measure we measure our uptime in minutes, not hours, and seconds even sometimes. And certainly if our technology is out for minutes or out for seconds, we'll hear about it again from our franchisees that are, man, they work really hard, 60, 80-hour weeks. I mean, we're talking about the people that own the franchisees. They're in their stores. They're making sure that it goes. It's not like something where they're buying it and looking at their bank account grow, and they're putting their heart and soul into it. We owe them that availability in there. So again, it's influential, and being influential to say and make sure that as we're thinking about the development of our technology and our innovations, that we're banking in and booking in even if it's something as small as, what version of an OS are we using, or do we use PaaS in our cloud versus IaaS, et cetera, to just give us that thought process where that we're banking in the availability from the ground up.
Yeah, Andy, I think that's so critical. The top line support and appreciation. I love that, and I think I'm going to borrow that because I think it's important that we really emphasize how critical availability is to systems. Right, the CIA triad's been with us for decades. We think in those terms, but oftentimes it does get less attention. It feels like
Yeah,
someone in IT is going to focus on availability, right? It's like a separate thing, but it really needs to be core to the conversation.
yeah, it's
But
the Cinderella effect, right? It's the stepchild that's off to the side, but yeah, I'm with you too with the availability aspect. In fact, when I first came into Domino, so I've been here for coming up on 4 years this fall. There was a lot of focus built into confidentiality and what do we, and again, super important, but
Mhm.
4 years ago now, ransomware was as much of an issue as it is today. But my initial so I talk about influencing, and my initial conversations were all about the tying it back to the business, right? Is the um, hey, by the way, like we're our business is measured by people being able to place those digital orders at a 85% clip, but then also at the same time is every order that somebody goes to a competitor or somebody goes to another type of quick service restaurant to get their meal is royalties that we don't get, but it's also the revenue that our franchisees don't get too. So there's an immediate tie into it from a business perspective versus, again, confidentiality is still as important as can be at the end of the day, but there isn't that direct impact to the top line, I guess you'd say, and
Yeah.
ultimately the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thinking about your business, you have thousands of franchisees out there. And you're protecting not only Domino's, the platform, the digital platform, but the interests of those stakeholders. Pushing resilience strategies, making the entire ecosystem more resilient, can feel a little bit like a bit of micromanagement, right? Maybe slowing down, maybe it can create a little friction. That's always the nature of the role we do. Any tips, tricks, you might say, hey, I want to implement these sets of new controls. It takes some time, right? It requires a bit of coordination, communication. Curious, what has worked for you?
Let me start that out by laying the groundwork for the benefit of the listeners is, how Domino's operates is so in my role, what the technology that the Domino's technology group manages is for our e-commerce environment and our stores primarily for the US market. We resell our e-commerce platform to a number of international markets, but taking another step back is think about it this way: is most of the global markets or most of the countries around the world are bucketed into what's called a master franchisee, where there's a franchise that buys a geographic or manages and leases a geographic region around the world. They like a standard franchisee and a lot of other organizations, or it could be a business unit and other companies that a CISO is working with. They have autonomy to a certain extent to implement controls given now we have the governance in place to say like, look, we're going to measure what your reliability is, and we're going to measure where you're at. But if they want to choose, a certain EDR product that's not the one that I'm using here in the US market, that's their prerogative. What I have found that helps out a lot in my tips for other CISOs, and again, take it or leave it, is um, having those conversations with your peers and those individuals in those seats, where you're a partner to them versus, kind of that draconian mindset of you're like, well, this is the way you're going to do it. Or again, something that like we'll put it this way, I have the ability to, if I did want to go up to our CEO, Russell, and say like, look, things aren't looking great. I certainly could have that get pushed down to force something, but it's not worth it, right? Like you got to hold on to that, and there's other ways of peeling the onion there, versus forcing it. So I think that's my advice: is live to fight another day, or win through the influence from the get go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an ongoing challenge, and I think it leads me right to the next thought, right? I think we've both talked extensively about this sort of shift from cost center focus, behind the scenes, absolutely necessary evil. I remember so many organizations I've been at, especially in financial services. There's a clear appreciation for the importance of cybersecurity. They don't necessarily know what we do for a living, right?
Yeah.
But in financial services, it's like, I know I need this function. We know it's critical. So driving a culture where you start to change to a business enabler requires a very different kind of sets of approaches, right? It's not the draconian, we're going to implement a set of controls from the top down. Sure, there's some natural friction, and I do think that's a diminishing return scenario, right? Eventually, you don't ingratiate yourself with the business, you're going to end up with challenges. I've personally have found that finding those opportunities where there's a dual win, where we both win, we're struggling with an issue, the business is on one side of it, I'm on the other side. Hey, can we find a way? Maybe it's, an audit that we were able to clear. Maybe it was a key customer concern that we were able to address. Curious, Andy, any tips, tricks around how to move your function into something that is clearly this direct benefit to the business?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you know what, I mean, I'm trying to think that there was a recent network upgrade. I think it's part of a network upgrade package that was being pushed by a peer of mine, who runs our infrastructure organization, to our franchisees, which was going to cost out of pocket, right? So again, if we come to them and say, let's even say my security tooling costs them money, like it's not something that we give them out of the goodness of our hearts, but they have to pay for that. And that particular technology upgrade, what they ended up finding was very interesting, is their internet connections were faster and their technology platforms were faster. So I think with a lot of technology, there's ways to make things both more reliant, but then also give this sense of, hey, this actually was worth it for us to do it. And I'm trying to think of things, and again, I try to relate things from just storytelling. I think that's another big thing that us as
Yeah.
CISOs have to have, is storytelling, is like a way to have that conversation to say like, yeah, I get it. There's the pain of having out, but there's so many intangible benefits that you're going to get from it. And again, not coming at people and saying like, well, look, we're going to prevent the breach by doing that. And like, again, the whole chicken little type of approach, because I've seen it throughout my career too, where as I was growing and aspiring to be a CISO, seeing people that have been, we're talking 20 plus years ago, in that role, where they would go to the board and say, oh man, like they're coming for us, and it's only a matter of time, and da da da. And that plays well, but only for a few cycles. And then eventually it's like, well, what's going on here, right? Like, I thought you said they were coming for us. And I would rather be, to your point, I think that there's enough technology. If we talk about innovation, there's ways for security to help to innovate. one of the things, and not getting into too specific details, but I'm a huge proponent of reducing the technical footprint for our office, right? And I actually think COVID was is one of the, I guess, positive things, if one could say that had come out of COVID, is like years and years, heading into COVID, who would have ever thought that we would be able to get rid of Ethernet connections into docking stations and computers, or have a local network? Um, like, you probably would have gotten laughed out of the room if you said, like, hey, I think everybody should just be on a connection that goes directly to the internet. Right? Like, well,
Yeah.
how are people going to print? How are people going to do this? And what COVID did is it taught us to develop our technology so that you didn't have to rely on a local network, which now, if we do those things, so then came the advent of secure service edge, right? And SASE type of solutions, which have gotten us to a point where we can pivot all the technologies to be, or all of the systems to be secured and monitored wherever you are in the world, whatever coffee shop you're in, et cetera, et cetera. And the outcome of that, again, this is another one of these cases where it's helped people work easier. The outcome of that is twofold for me. East-west traffic, the thought process of somebody doing, the pass a hash or golden ticket or those types of threats are gone. But then also the cool offshoot of it too is, this is where I talk to my team too, is how we measure the wins, is having people from the business come up and say, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to log onto a VPN and do the multi-factor and all those things that they used to have to do, that they saw as a pain, and they saw as a pain because of security. There are a lot of ways for us to have that resilient model. And in fact, in the, not pitching for absolute as much, but it's I will say this, with the resilience in the products that Absolute has, is the ability to keep people up to the latest versions of applications. It's very special for us because, again, I think that that's going to cut out the bugs. Like 99%, I said, well, random number, but 90, I guess I said 90+% of these updates that you see to Chrome and Edge and all these other applications are for bugs first, not for security issues. It's the security issues we talk about, but like, imagine if we could get to X-1 versioning throughout our entire environment, like a snap. That's going to do two things. One, if there's intuitively, it's going to make people work faster because those bugs have just gone away. But then it's going to get us out of this mindset of having to chase people to fix things, and or having our infrastructure people and our application people chasing ghosts, right, for problems. And it just happens to be that person that yells the loudest is happy, was on a version of Chrome that was like 80 versions old because they never hit that update button.
Sounds like life experience talking, right? Like I think we've lived that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Andy. I think we're stepping into a world where those things just have to be a given. Every single device up to date all the time. Like the advances, and this is actually a perfect segue to sort of the wrap-up question here, right? Like, as we sort of looking ahead, where we're headed as not only your industry, your organization, there are major challenges out there. There are headwinds that we're all facing that can have an impact to the A in the CIA triad, as well as many other areas of risk. Maybe it's AI threats, maybe it's somewhere in your supply chain, but in the QSR space and for your organization, what are the kinds of things that have you kind of a bit focused and concerned, right? Like, not necessarily a major, keeping you up at night, right? Because we are all in the business of managing risk, but where's your focus?
I think a lot of the focus is in building muscle memory, so that it's not something where let's say that we needed a specific tool, or we needed to have something at our side to be able to recover, where we've started with the tabletops and then moved to the testing it with in a non-production environment, and then actually the advent of the cloud has helped us to be able to, okay, let's establish in a separate region, a net new environment. But getting through those, again, like I talk about with the tooling, like how often have we, I guess in personal life, gone to do something and you forgot a particular ingredient, or you didn't have that tool you needed, or you needed to go and buy it, right? Like I don't want to have that be the issue in a live fire event where it's like, oh, we never knew that. And I get back to, it's the culture of the organization and Domino's technology. One of the things that I inherited that I love is they have a set of rules to the road, and rule number one is no surprises, and it's meant for a number of things, right? Like, okay, don't wait to ask for something, etc. But resiliency for me is not having it be a surprise when something happens. I want it to be a well-oiled process for people to be like, okay, well, there's an outage. Here's what we're going to do to get better, versus versus it being a surprise and being something where we realize that we didn't have the right tooling and technology in place. And I think companies that do that really well are ones that are better for so many other ways. And like, nobody loves to do a tabletop, or to do a live fire event at midnight on a Thursday or something like that. But like, you have to, until you do it, until you try it, like, you just don't know.
Yeah, Andy, it is so spot on. The need to have the muscle memory. I'm reminded, I'm going to potentially miss a tribute to Jacko Willing, but he comes to mind because I've heard him say this. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training, right? You fall to the level of your training. What is muscle memory for your organization is what you're going to do. So it's an important reminder of the need for operators like you and like me to stay on top of what is the organization's response apparatus. How is the entirety of the organization in a crisis going to come together, and do they have that muscle memory in place?
Yeah.
So Andy, absolutely phenomenal conversation. Love chatting with you. Look forward to catching up. I'm sure I'll be out in your neck of the woods soon enough, and we can catch up. Thank
I'll
you
stop
again
on
for the
by. Yeah, I would
opportunity.
love to have you out here.
Awesome. Thank you again, Andy.
Thank you.